I stood across the street, staring up at the glass walls like they could break. Seattle had been gray all morning, the kind of gray that makes colors disappear, but that building, her building, still shimmered. Sophia always liked tall windows. Glass keeps you honest, she used to say. It lets the light in, and light tells the truth. But now, standing there, truth felt like a sick joke. I clutched the brown leather folder tighter to my chest. It was worn soft at the corners, creased and familiar, a second skin. It still smelled faintly of lavender from those long nights at our old apartment, when I'd lay awake beside her, scribbling into sketchbooks while she slept. She used to call it the heartbeat binder. Now it felt like a corpse, the revolving. Doors opened with a soft hiss. I stepped inside. The lobby was cool, quiet, a cathedral of curated creativity. White walls, matte black fixtures. People moved like ghosts between digital screens and moss-covered walls. All of it sterile and intentional. All of it Sophia. Her name floated above the front desk on a digital display, upcoming solo showcase. Fragments of her, A Journey in Hidden Voices, curated by Sophia Lane. My heart didn't just drop, it fractured. I moved toward the exhibition wall. Posters were being arranged in a neat grid by interns who didn't look a day over. 22. I stared at one of the central panels. It featured a deep navy background with white chalk-like script, fragmented into delicate lines. The caption beneath it read, "Inspired by the unseen narratives of queer womanhood." And there it was. The pattern, the shattered typeface, the overlay of ghost hands, the muted textures that came from charcoal impressions of my own skin. It was mine, not inspired by Mine Dot, a design I'd made in grief after my father said I was unwelcome. Unless I found a cure, a layout built from journal entries I burned in fear before I ever spoke them aloud. A visual map of my own quiet resurrection, twisted, extracted, and now sold as hers. I took a step back, dizzy. "Can I help you?" A voice said behind me, polite, guarded. I turned. It was a young assistant, clipboard in hand. "No," I said too fast. Then slower, softer. "No, I was just remembering." I smiled like I had no right to cry. The brochure stand caught my eye near the exit, rows of thick cream cardstock with gold lettering. I took one. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed proof that I wasn't imagining it, that someone else had seen my insides and decided they'd look better in someone else's frame. Outside, the wind stung. My hand shook as I unfolded the brochure. Every name listed under creative acknowledgments was familiar. Studio collaborators, interns, even a barista Sophia once adored. Mine wasn't there, not once. Not even as a footnote. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter every polished window in that damn building. But instead, I stood still, frozen on the pavement like I didn't remember how walking worked. A couple passed by. The man glanced at the flyer in my hands. "That the new Sophia Lane show?" he asked, nodding approvingly. I nodded too, because lying was easier than collapsing. The traffic light blinked red. Behind me, the building's reflection stretched across a puddle, warped, rippled, unsteady. Like it was trying to tell me the truth underneath all that glass. Light doesn't reveal everything. Sometimes it just blinds you to what's already gone. I crossed the street. I walked until the brochure curled at the edges in my sweaty palm. I walked until her name stopped echoing in my head. But it never really stopped. I should have gone home. But I didn't have one anymore. Not really. Not in the city where her perfume lingered in every gallery, where her name was printed like gospel in every program. So I went to the Waterfront, sat on a bench beside a statue of some historical figure no one really cared about, and opened the leather folder. Inside were the original prints. My charcoal renditions of silence. The layered transparency tests Sophia said were too much. The one with the quote I wrote in the dark after I first said the word lesbian out loud. I was a girl before I had a name. But I didn't start living until I chose it. She'd taken that line. It was on the fourth panel in her show. Only now it was wrapped in a serif font and accompanied by a photo of her childhood bedroom, like the words were hers all along. That was the moment. My breath caught. That was the moment my stomach twisted, not just in grief, but recognition. She didn't just borrow my work. She didn't just cheat on a credit or copyright. She stole the part of me I whispered in the dark when no one else was listening. 3 years ago, I met Sophia in a place that smelled like eucalyptus and rain. An old converted barn in Oregon turned into a queer women's art residency. There were 12 of us that spring, and I was the quiet one. I remember the first time I saw her. She had a smudge of black ink across her cheek and a mouth stained like cherries from too much red wine. She moved like she belonged in every room, and the room knew it. While the rest of us clung to polite introductions, she walked in, kicked off her boots, and said, "Let's make something ugly, something honest." I fell a little bit in love with her in that moment. And every moment after, I kept falling out. My studio space was the smallest. A corner tucked behind a dusty kill. I didn't mind. I liked small places. Sophia called them womb spaces, places where art could gestate. She would visit late at night, barefoot, balancing 2 chipped mugs of coffee like an offering. "You need to go deeper," she said once, hovering over my sketches. "This is pretty, but it's not bleeding yet. I don't want to bleed for strangers." "You're not bleeding for them," she whispered, brushing charcoal from my wrist. "You're bleeding for the girl who never got to speak." That night, I showed her my journal. Not the leather-bound sketch pad I used in class, the real one. The one with tear stains and ink smears and confessions scrawled at 2 a.m. when the world felt like it might forget me. She didn't flinch. She just read, slowly, reverently, and when she looked up, her eyes were damp. "This," she said, holding the journal like it was sacred. "This is the heart of your work." That's when I started building. Whispers in the dark. And that's when she started watching me in the way a sculptor watches clay. When the residency ended, we didn't say goodbye. We packed a U-Haul together. I left behind my studio in Portland, my part-time teaching job, my lease, and the little life I'd been stitching together. Sophia said we could do better in Seattle, that we were meant to rise together. "We're a brand," she said, laughing as we unpacked into our shared loft. "Not just girlfriends, a movement." I gave her everything. Not because she asked, but because when someone sees your deepest self and still calls it beautiful, you offer it all. We freelanced under her name at first. Sophia Lane's studio had more clout. She said she'd add me to the credits once we got steady work. "It's just easier for now," she'd assure me. "We're in this together, you know that?" And I believed her. At night, she'd hold me in bed and whisper things like, "You're my secret weapon, and one day they'll know." I didn't care about the spotlight. I just wanted the safety, the closeness, the feeling of being seen and still chosen. But there were moments, small moments, quiet ones, the kind that only start screaming when you look back, like the time a client complimented a layout I'd spent 3 nights designing, and Sophia replied, "Thanks, I worked really hard on that." Or when she forgot to list me on the About page again. She blamed it on the web designer. When I brought it up gently, she'd kiss my forehead and say, "You always underestimate yourself. That's why I have to protect your work." That word protect used to feel noble. Later, it felt like a lock. People started noticing. My friend Rima asked one night over drinks, "Hey, why doesn't Sophia ever tag you when she posts about the projects?" I shrugged, made some excuse about branding. Rima didn't push. But her silence said enough. A mentor of mine from school emailed me after seeing one of Sophia's magazine spreads. She wrote, "Are these your pieces? Because if so, Emma, you need to start protecting your name." I remember reading that line twice. Protecting your name. I didn't even know where mine lived anymore. There was a party once, one of those cold Seattle nights where creatives gathered in refurbished warehouses to sip overpriced cocktails and pretend they weren't competing. Sophia wore her signature red lip, and I trailed behind her like a ghost with a wine glass. People congratulated her on her distinct visual voice. Someone said, "I've never seen grief translated so delicately." She smiled, took the compliment, didn't mention me. Later that night, when I asked why, she rolled her eyes. "You want me to pause every conversation to say, 'Actually, my girlfriend helped'?" I said, "No, I just want to feel like I'm not invisible." She didn't answer. She just kissed me hard enough to make me forget why I asked, and still I stayed. I kept designing, kept handing her drafts, kept believing that this, whatever this was love. That maybe partnership meant sacrifice. That maybe this was what growth looked like, letting someone else speak your truth. It wasn't until much later, after the unraveling, that I realized we didn't just fall in love. We made each other up. She needed a voice that bled. I needed someone who'd promised to never leave. She saw art in my ache. I saw safety in her spotlight, but the light she offered wasn't warm. It was surgical, dissecting, curated for exhibition. She didn't want me. She wanted the sound I made when I was hurting, the sound she could package and sell, and I, desperate to be heard, let her. The live stream buffer flickered for a moment, then steadied, and there she was. Sophia. Bathed in light, standing tall on a velvet-lined stage in San Francisco, her silhouette framed by a cascading screen of projected quotes. My quotes. She wore a black jumpsuit, the same one I helped her hem, laughing on the floor with pins between my teeth. Around her neck was the emerald pendant I gave her on our second anniversary, the one she said made her feel brave. I sat on the edge of the couch in my tiny apartment in Seattle, wearing pajama bottoms and a hoodie that still smelled faintly like her shampoo. My laptop was balanced on a stack of old design textbooks. The only light in the room came from the screen, and from her. The presenter's voice rang out. "The Rising Visionary Award goes to Sophia Lane for her groundbreaking work in Fragments of Her, A Journey in Hidden Voices." Applause erupted. My heart stopped. They said her name. Not mine, not once. She stepped forward, accepting the award with that polished smile, the one she practiced in the mirror when she was nervous. But she didn't look nervous now. She looked effortless. Heroic. She began her speech. "I wanted to dedicate this award to the women whose voices are often silenced, to those who've survived shame, abandonment, and invisibility. This collection is yours." The audience applauded. I didn't blink. She was quoting Whispers in the Dark word for word. My collection, my wounds, my lines. Only now they belonged to her. She didn't even flinch. Didn't look like she was borrowing. She looked like she'd bled them herself, but I knew the difference because I was the difference. My phone buzzed on the armrest. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I picked it up. Text 1. "Emma, this is your collection, right?" Text 2. "I'm watching the stream. Are you okay?" Everyone's whispering. She didn't even thank you. Text 3. "You didn't give her permission for this, did you?" I dropped the phone. The room suddenly spun, like the air had shifted, like the floor couldn't hold me up. I stumbled to the bathroom and barely made it to the toilet before I threw up. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the humiliation. The visibility of it. The feeling that everyone knew, and I was the last to see it clearly. After the nausea passed, I sat on the cold tile floor, staring at the grout lines like they could offer some kind of logic. My stomach was empty, but my throat still burned. Crawled back to the living room. Sophia was still speaking, still performing. My words were coming out of her mouth, carefully rephrased and rebranded. Lines from my journals. Images from my past. Her hands motioned as if she were holding truth itself, but truth doesn't wear someone else's skin. I picked up my phone, dialed. Her number rang 4 times before voicemail clicked in. Her voice, casual, sweet, spilled through the speaker. Hey, it's Soph. Leave something beautiful. I didn't leave anything. I just hung up and stared at the wall for a while. The silence in the apartment wasn't peaceful. It was thick, bloated, full of ghosts I hadn't invited. I turned toward the bedroom. The closet door stood open. Inside, her clothes still hung like she might walk back in at any moment. That soft green coat she wore when she wanted to be. Taken seriously, the red scarf from Paris. The blazer I once spilled ink on and tried to scrub for hours. I walked over and pressed my face into the fabric. Her perfume, vanilla and bergamot, hit me like a slap. I stumbled back. It didn't smell warm anymore. It smelled like theater, like masking, like everything she'd ever done was dipped in presentation. I opened my laptop and clicked into our shared design folder. She hadn't changed the password. Not yet. Inside. Everything was neatly labeled, as if curated for an archive. A project folder titled Fragments had subfolders named Textures, Color Studies, Voice, Notes. I clicked Voice Notes. A file popped up, untitled January 8th. I remembered that night. It was raining. I was sitting by the window, speaking into my phone because I didn't want to forget a line that came to me in a dream. I used to think silence protected me, but I was just handing people the pen. That audio was in her collection. In her speech, she didn't even change the cadence. I clicked into textures. There, in high resolution, were scans of the same sketch pages I had once buried under. Our bed in a shoebox marked private. She had scanned them. I opened the metadata. The date was from 6 months ago. She had done it when I was out of town, while I was presenting at a small queer arts festival in Portland. The one she said she couldn't attend because she had a migraine. She was in her home, going through my things, digitizing my pain. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't desperate. It was curated, planned, executed. I opened my journal, the current one, the one I kept next to my bed. My handwriting was looser now, less scared. On the last page, I'd written something a few nights ago. I am slowly learning that not everyone who listens deserves the sound. I pressed my fingers to the paper and wept. I wept for the Emma who thought love meant exposure, for the Emma who believed being seen meant being safe, for the Emma who thought secrets became lighter when you whispered them into a lover's mouth. But not this time. This time, they became currency, design, content. I don't know how long I lay there, face down on the rug, tears soaking into the fibers. But at some point, as the city outside hummed on without me, something inside cracked open, not shattered, but sharpened. Like the outline of a blade beginning to surface through mud. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter, heavier, more dangerous. Clarity. Sophia hadn't just stolen my art. She had stolen the version of me I only ever dared share with her. She hadn't just broken my trust. She'd broken the contract of intimacy, this sacred, unspoken oath between two people who promised to hold each other's wounds with care. And now, she was holding mine up for applause, but the applause would stop. And when it did, I would be ready. I left in the dark. No warning, no goodbye, no carefully crafted Instagram farewell post. Just a single suitcase, my brown leather portfolio, A bus ticket to a town whose name I picked from a list because it sounded like it had salt in it. Bones, 2 states south, on the edge of nowhere and the Pacific. I arrived in Still Harbor, a place where the ocean spoke louder than the traffic. And no one asked where you came from if you paid rent on time. It was exactly what I needed. City where her name didn't echo in gallery halls. Where no one said Sophia, like it was a blessing or a brand. Found the attic room by accident. The bookstore was nestled between a closed-down diner and a bar with a busted neon O. The upstairs window had lace curtains and an old hanging. Fern that looked half dead or maybe just tired. I liked it immediately. The owner, Lila, was a woman in her 50s with salt gray curls and a voice like old jazz records. She wore flowy cardigans and smelled faintly of rosemary and paper. "You look like you're running from something," she said, not unkindly. I blinked. She smiled. "Good. So's everyone else here." Then she handed me the key. Rent was cheap. The attic had creaky floors, a window seat, and just enough space for a bed, a desk, and a coffee maker. I unpacked in silence and didn't hang a single thing on the wall. For the first 3 weeks, I did nothing. Not nothing in the dramatic, self-destructive way. Just nothing that required creation. I shelved books in the store. Cleaned dust from poetry shelves. Rearranged table displays. Lila never asked what I used to do. She just said, "Books heal slow, like people. Dust them, shelve them, don't rush them." So I dusted. I let the silence swell. I let it press into the parts of me that had been rubbed raw. The part of me that still expected Sophia's voice to be behind every closed door. It was strange. The first time I went a whole day without hearing her name in my head. It felt like blasphemy, like forgetting how to pray, but it also felt lighter. The sketching came later, not deliberately. It started with a grocery list on the back of a napkin. The way I doodled the edge of a blueberry because it reminded me of my mother's earrings. Then another night, a crooked lamppost, a peeling sticker on a mailbox. My hand moved before I could stop it. I didn't draw people. Not at first. I drew shadows. Empty chairs, rested hinges. Door frames without doors. It was the first time in months I made anything without fear of being watched. The lines were shaky, uneven, but they were mine. And that mattered. Still Harbor had a small LGBTQ+ center tucked behind the library. I didn't plan on going. I walked past it 3 times before I finally stepped in. There were string lights and mismatched chairs. A bulletin board covered in Polaroids and handwritten notes. "You're not broken. You can start again. Love didn't ruin you. They did." A woman offered me tea. I sat in a circle without speaking for 2 meetings. No one pushed. At the third, I spoke. I didn't say Sophia's name. I didn't mention the portfolio or the award or the betrayal shaped like a standing ovation. I just said, I gave someone everything, and now I don't know what's left. Caleb, a trans man in his 30s with tattooed forearms and a laugh that always came late, nodded. He waited, then said, "People can steal your work, but not your witness, not the way your body remembers." I wrote that down when I got home. Pinned it above my bed with a safety pin. I bought a cheap secondhand film camera from a thrift store. It didn't always work. Sometimes it clicked but didn't capture. But I liked the surprise. The absence. I started walking before dawn, photographing fog, cracked sidewalks. Fishing nets hung like prayer flags, a spoon left in a cafe window. Graffiti that said, "You didn't imagine it. They just laid better." Each photo felt like proof, not just of beauty, but of presence. I was here. I saw this. Even if no one else did. One morning, Lila found me sketching in the back room. She looked over my shoulder, said nothing. Then, after a pause, she whispered, You draw like someone who survived a fire. The lines aren't afraid of being broken. I don't know why that made me cry, but it did. She didn't touch me, just handed me a mug of coffee and said, "There's an art show coming up. You don't have to enter. But the deadline's on the counter if you change your mind." I didn't answer, but I didn't throw the flyer away. Some days I still thought about her, what she was wearing, if she still used my phrases, if the pendant I gave her had dulled from overuse, if she'd won more awards for the pain she never lived. But most days, I didn't, not because it didn't hurt, but because I was starting to remember what life felt like before I gave her the key to my voice dot in the attic. I taped my sketches to the wall, one by one, dot not in frames, not curated. Just raw edges, and THUMBTACK dot Lila came up one afternoon and stood in the doorway, arms folded, humming something low. "I think," she said slowly, "you're beginning to sound like yourself." Again, I wanted to ask what I sounded like before, but maybe that wasn't the point. One night at the support circle, Caleb brought in a piece he'd written for an upcoming zine. He read a line that stayed with me. They named me wrong, and I let them until I didn't. The room was quiet after. No applause. No validation. Just quiet, sacred witness, and I realized something. Sophia didn't just rename my work. She renamed me. Turned me into a ghost. Background inspiration, invisible labor, uncredited echo. But I was learning to be loud again. In my own way. In soft sketches. In silent photographs. In breath that didn't ask permission. The flyer sat untouched on my desk for days. Then, one evening, I picked it up. Deadline, 2 weeks. I didn't think I'd enter, but I did begin a new piece, not for the show. For me, Dot, it was a self-portrait, but not of my face, of my hands holding a torn page. Above it, the words. She didn't break me. She just mistook my silence for surrender. I didn't need to publish it, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I knew one day I would, and when I did, it would have my name on it. I renamed the collection Still Here on a Tuesday. Dot. It was raining outside. The kind of soft, steady rain that made the bookstore smell like wet wood and ink. I was on the attic floor, surrounded by pages, old and new, scanned sketches, notes, scribbled in the margins of receipts, an envelope full of dried ocean leaves I once thought I'd use for texture. I looked at everything I'd been afraid to touch again, and I began to piece it together. Not the way Sophia once curated it, sanitized, flattened, softened to marketable grief, but raw, with the bruises intact, with the rage unpolished, with the truth standing like a woman in a rainstorm, unafraid to be soaked. Dot. It wasn't a resurrection. It was a reclamation. I signed up for an online course in copyright and creative ownership. Not glamorous, not emotional, but necessary. I didn't want revenge. I wanted receipts. I cataloged everything. A screenshot of an old text Sophia sent. "This one is brilliant. It's your voice, all the way." A voice memo from the night I read her my piece about my mother and coming out, her audible sniffle, followed by, "God, Emma, this will change someone's life." Sketches dated in pencil. A shared Google Doc history showing line-by-line edits, emails with attachments, comments that said, "Your original is better." I turned every memory into METATA. Dot. At night, I still walked the shoreline. Sometimes with the camera, sometimes without, but the silence inside me had changed. It wasn't vacant anymore. Dot. It was spacious, like a room with the windows open, like a body breathing again after being held too long underwater. Dot. It happened on a Thursday. I was eating leftover pasta in the break room downstairs when Caleb slid his phone across the table. "You should see this." It was a tweet, viral, flaming with compliments and industry hashtags. Sophia Arlen's latest body of work is a triumph of queer resilience. Lines that sear, the day she buried me, I grew teeth. The fork froze in my hand, I didn't. Need to Google it. I wrote that line. Wrote it on the same night my mother stopped answering my calls. Wrote it through sobs that cracked the stylus in my hand. Wrote it and then vowed never to publish it. Because some things were too sacred, too earned. I had told Sophia it was mine. That it wasn't for the world. And now the world was clapping for her. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I walked upstairs, sat down at my desk, and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "The voice she buried," and underneath, an anonymous testimony, a witness statement, a digital resurrection. I didn't name her, not at first. But I named me. I told the story. From the beginning. Of how I met a woman who said she loved my voice so much she wanted to wear it. Of how I handed it to her slowly, trusting that love was the same as stewardship. Of how she didn't just forget me, she erased me. And then how I began again. I published the blog the next morning. No links to my socials, no bio. Just the words. By afternoon, the post had 3,000 reads. By midnight, it had 12,00 comments rolled in. I know this story. This happened to me. Art theft is real, especially in queer spaces. You are not invisible. You are louder for surviving. The next post was titled, "Proof is not petty." And the next, "Silence is a kind of consent." But I never meant yes. They weren't essays. They were testimonies, and they spread like fire through dry grief. Sophia posted a story 2 days later, a filtered photo of her standing beside a coastal window. The caption, "Inspiration is collective. Grateful to carry the voices of so many." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I emailed a law firm that specialized in creative intellectual property. The same night, I received a reply. A junior associate named Ria said, "We've been tracking cases like this. We'd be honored to take yours. You have a strong chain of evidence. And if you're willing, a story that matters." I stared at the word honored for a long time. When had I last felt honored for what I made? The process began in slow steps, filing, notarizing, archiving. My inbox filled with legal language, infringement, authorship, derivative use, cease and desist. But it wasn't sterile. It was sacred. Like taking back a stolen heirloom from someone. Who thought you'd never notice? Lila brought me a latte one afternoon and said softly, "Your eyes have changed." I looked up. "How so?" "They used to scan the room like everything might break you," she said. "Now they scan like you're measuring what you'll rebuild." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled. I made a new piece for Still Here, a black and white sketch, a rib cage grown over with ivy. In the space where the heart should be, I drew a quill. Underneath, "Not all scars need covering." I posted it to my anonymous blog with the caption, "She wrote me out of my own origin." So I wrote myself back in. By then, the blog had over 50,000 readers. A journalist reached out, asking for an interview. I said, "No, not yet. This wasn't about going viral. It was about becoming undeniable." Caleb found me outside the library one day, holding a printed page from the blog. His hands trembled slightly. "This one," he said. "The post about how you stopped drawing because you didn't want to feed her more of you." He looked up. His eyes were red. "I haven't played guitar in 6 years because my ex still performs with the songs we wrote together. But after reading your post," he took a shaky breath, "I booked an open mic slot. We didn't hug. We just sat together on the steps like survivors sharing warmth. One day, a woman emailed through the blog's contact form. She identified herself as a former intern in Sophia's design firm. She said simply, 'I saw her workshop one of your pieces. I didn't know at the time, but now I do. I saved the time-stamped presentation deck. Let me know if it helps. It helped. I forwarded it to Ria. The case wasn't a spectacle. There were no courtrooms, no shouting matches, no dramatic walkouts, but there was truth.evidence.witness. Eventually, Sophia's firm settled. No admission of guilt, but an agreement. They would pull the award submission, publish a correction, transfer credit publicly, compensate for previous unauthorized reproductions, and most importantly, acknowledge authorship. Ria called me after the final draft was signed. You did it, she said, without ever raising her voice. I hung up and stood still for a long time. Then I walked to the water, wrote my name in the wet sand, watched it hold, then disappear. A month later, I received a package at the bookstore. No return address. Inside, one of the design books Sophia and I once admired together. On the inside cover, in handwriting I knew too well. I never knew how to love a voice without stealing it. I'm sorry, you were always the author. I closed the book slowly. Then I walked it out to the donation box and left it there, because I didn't need her apology. I already had my name back. The next blog post was titled, "She Can't Steal What I Haven't Finished." I wrote, I used to think I had to race her, that if I didn't create fast enough, she'd get there first and rename the truth. But now I know I am not on her timeline. I am not in her story. I am not competing. I am becoming. When Still Here finally released, small, self-published, imperfect, it sold more copies than I imagined, not because it was polished, but because it was honest. Every page was stitched with memory, every illustration a refusal to be erased, every caption mine. Not in revenge, but in return. The conference hall buzzed with industry laughter and flashing lights, champagne glasses clinking, heels tapping against polished floors, flashes from press cameras reflecting off glass installations. The venue hadn't changed. Neither had the oversized light fixtures hanging like modern chandeliers, or the rich velvet curtains pulled to the sides of the grand stage. But Emma had, and when she stepped through those doors, wearing a charcoal gray suit tailored sharp at the shoulders, a silver ring that once belonged to her aunt, and a pendant of her own making pressed against her collarbone, she didn't flinch. Name on the welcome banner wasn't hers, yet the award being presented wasn't hers. But it used to be. Sophia stood on stage, poised as ever in a deep green dress that caught the light like envy. She spoke with practiced grace, thanking the women who taught her to listen. Her fingers brushed the emerald pendant at her neck, the one Emma had given her years ago on a rainy anniversary night in Oregon. The pendant didn't shimmer now. It pulsed like betrayal. Emma sat in the second row, hands folded, heart slow and steady. She could feel eyes on her already. Not everyone knew, but enough did. She caught sight of a journalist whispering into her phone. Someone in the back nudged their colleague and tilted their head toward her. Emma had once shrunk from this kind of spotlight. Now she leaned into it. Sophia's speech crescendoed with a quote from the project she'd renamed Fragments of Her, a line Emma remembered writing in the dark after a fight, raw, unguarded, not meant for applause. And to every woman whose voice was buried, I say, we rise. The audience erupted into applause. Sophia beamed, bowed her head slightly, and turned to leave the stage, but a voice from the wings said, Emma Sinclair, next speaker. The room hushed. Sophia froze halfway down the steps. She turned. Her painted smile faltered. Emma rose. Every step to the podium sounded louder than it should have. Her shoes on the wood floor, the soft scrape of paper in her hand, the tightening of her breath. She adjusted the mic. You don't know my name, she said evenly, scanning the crowd. But you've spoken my words. The stillness was instant. A kind of collective breath held midair. I'm not here for drama or revenge, she continued. I'm here because facts have timelines and truth has a voice. She pulled out a remote and clicked to the first slide, a journal scan, dated, captioned in her handwriting. Then another, early sketches, time-stamped files, an email from Sophia praising your best work yet. The stolen phrases highlighted in yellow, side by side with Sophia's public posts. The audience shifted uncomfortably. From behind her, Sophia's voice rang out. Emma, this isn't... But she was cut off by a firm voice from the panel. Let her finish. Emma didn't falter. These aren't accusations, they're receipts. Her tone stayed calm, almost soft, which only made it hit harder. She ended with one final slide, a photograph of them from that first summer. Soaked in rain and paint, a caption scribbled beneath, she told me to bleed. I did. She bottled it. Silence. No applause. Not yet. Then the murmurs began, journalists typing, someone gasping audibly and Sophia's face flushing under the spotlight she once owned. The moderator gently thanked Emma and motioned her off stage. She walked past Sophia without looking at her, but in her periphery, she saw it, that first flicker of recognition in Sophia's eyes. Not guilt, not regret. Just the terror of being seen. Legal notices followed days later, quiet retractions in art blogs. Sophia's award was rescinded pending investigation. An op-ed appeared in a major publication titled Whose Voices? And anyway, and Emma, for once, didn't have to speak for herself. The world was doing it now, but the real ending didn't happen in court filings or comment sections. It happened weeks later, in a renovated gallery space just off Ashmont Street, under soft white lights and minimalist concrete walls. A small plaque read, "Still here, the works of Emma Sinclair." She stood at the entrance in the same suit, her aunt's ring catching the sun this time. Inside, people wandered through her story, brushstroke by brushstroke, print by print. No voiceover, no explanation. Just truth, raw and visible. A woman in a wheelchair paused at one of the installations and whispered, I felt this. I lived this. Emma smiled and simply nodded. That was enough. By the time night fell, the gallery was full. Someone brought her a lavender soda. Someone else handed her a card that said, Thank you for surviving out loud. Later, sitting alone. On the rooftop above the exhibit, she pressed her palm against her chest. The pendant there hummed softly against her heartbeat. The storm had passed, but she was still standing. A soft voice played in her memory, her own now. You can steal a voice, it said, but not the echo. Not the part that lives in silence and survives the storm. I am the storm now. And I sign my name in thunder.